Hi everyone, with Hashem's help, you're listening to another edition of Mysteries of the Creation. I really love this teaching. As many of you know, I study quantum physics as a hobby, so that can just tell you how much that I enjoy this topic. Anything of science, anything that has to do with the world and the universe. If you've ever asked yourself, how did Hashem do that? This is a book that really will tackle a lot of those questions. And when we started out in the introduction, we really laid the ground about how information as we know it today really comes to be, and how we can't always trust where the information is coming from. So you really have to do your due diligence in really, getting to the bottom of where, whatever it is that you, and this really goes beyond just this topic, it's everything in life. Get to the bottom, get to the source. Know that source is a kosher source, and then build your decisions based upon that information. But part of the key is that you have to have the information. One of the areas that I find in life in general is that you always see this debate between Torah and science, and this book really just comes to tackle just that. And this chapter, we're going to start getting into that. And one of the things we're going to get into in this chapter is really, I'm sure like many of you, you've heard the debates of how old is the world. And, of course, I believe carbon dating can only prove 25,000 years. There's no hard evidence that the world is millions of years. But I think for many people in the religious side, they get caught up in the 6,000 years, and that is the time from the creation of Adam and Hava. And of course, this is, I'm sure anyone outside of Judaism or people who go against the oral tradition will really start to, say, I say this is why it is so important to have that, the oral tradition, because there's an explanation of what the written Torah is saying. And if you don't have that, this is where you kind of get yourself tripped up. So we're actually going to start we're going to start getting into those oral commentaries that really explain what the written word was saying when we're talking about that infamous line in the Torah in the beginning. So we're going to get to it. So it says, the Gemara in Shabbos 114a teaches us, who are the builders? The true builders are the Tamidei Chachamim, those who study Torah, for they labor at construction of the world all their lives. So it's funny, if you ever heard this term, builder, or in some non-Jewish traditions like Christianity, you hear carpenter, this is what they're talking about. I think a lot of times, I think there's one of the biggest like aha moments when I was leaving Christianity is that, Yoshka, Yeshu wasn't out there building houses. So I was like, what do you mean he wasn't building houses? Like, I totally want to get a blueprint for my house. And so this is one of the aha moments. So this is where really knowing the lingo, I can imagine that maybe a few generations from now, they will all be wondering what we meant when we said LOL. So this is kind of, if you weren't there, if you weren't from the time, if you didn't have an accurate description, you don't know what we're talking about. So this is one of those statements. So it says, this statement is a mystery. Tamidei Chachamim engage themselves in intellectual pursuits. They build nothing. Moreover, the world needs no construction because it already exists. The Gemara elsewhere in Shabbos 88a provides us with a clue to the resolution of our problem. The psalmist in 76:9 proclaims, from the heavens you announced the law. The earth feared and was calm. How can the earth simultaneously fear and be calm? Rather, first it feared and then was calm. Why did it fear? The Torah records in the story of creation in Bereshit 1:31, it became evening and it became morning the sixth day. Why does the Torah say here the sixth day, when in the record of the prior days it uses one day, a second day, a third day, etc.? The reason is that God created the world with a stipulation. If Yisrael accepts the Torah when I offer it to them on the sixth day of Sivan of the year 2448, the creation will continue to exist. Otherwise, I will return the world to Tohu and Bohu, and we'll discuss what these words mean later. There is yet more. The Gemara in Paskim 68b comments, the world exists only for the sake of Torah. If Torah would cease to be studied, the world would cease to exist. Eventually, then the world exists depends not merely on the ancient acceptance of Torah, but on the contemporary study of the Torah as well. This is brought out further by the Midrash in Tachumu Bereshis 1. The world was founded solely on the Torah. God gave it to Yisrael to study and perform the mitzvot day and night, because for the sake of those who maintain the Torah, the world exists. So that's a really, if you ever want to think about, when you're giving tzedakah, where you want to give it to, and give it here, right, to the Torah study, you would be doing a world of good, literally. Rabbi Chaim of Voloshin in his Nefesh Chacham 4.1 takes this one step further. If at any time, for even a moment, Torah would cease to be studied everywhere, the world would instantly come to an end, for the world constantly survives on the Torah that is studied at that moment. So at this moment, pat yourself on the back, you're helping the world to exist because you are studying Torah. So it says, if the world exists on the study of Torah, we can understand why Talmidei Chachamim are really the true builders. However, we are led to wonder, how did the world exist for 2,448 years before the Torah was given? Chazal discusses this problem in Paskim 118a. The psalmist in 136 sings, "Give thanks to God, for his kindness is eternal," 26 times. Why so many? Because there were 26 generations from the creation of the world until the Torah was given, during which time God supported the world solely out of his kindness. There's a problem, however, with the concept that the world exists solely on the constant study of Torah. First, the world has not come to an end heretofore. Apparently, then, there has not been any moment in history since Matan Torah devoid of the study of Torah. Evidently, too, we can be sure that the world will not come to an end in the future, for God has made us many promises that have yet to be realized. In the restoration of the Beit HaMikdash and the kingdom of the house of David, the gathering of all the exiles, the resurrection of the dead, and other promises, a promise of God cannot fail, as the Navi in Yeshaya 55:10-11 assures us. Just as rain and snow do not descend from the heavens without quenching the land's thirst and making it produce and grow, giving seeds for sowing and bread to eat, says God, the word that comes from my mouth cannot return empty-handed without accomplishing what I desired and succeeding in its mission. This is an awesome promise. But you ever think, guys, is this the reason why time zones exist, right? Because we can't all be up at the same time. So it really makes me wonder, is this the purpose of time zones where, if it's in Eretz Israel and they're up, we're sleeping, and then when they're sleeping, we're up, and and then you see in the Philippines where they're, 12 hours ahead from us. So it's a very interesting concept. So it says, we can be sure then the world will not come to an end because people fail to maintain Torah study. Evidently, we can feel safe that somebody somewhere will be engrossed in Torah, as indeed is promised in Yeshaya 59:21. I say, declares God, this covenant of mine with them, my spirit which is on you, and my words that I put in your mouth will not be removed from your mouth and from the mouth of your descendants from now and forever. If so, the threat of the world's ending because of interruption of Torah is not a very practical worry. The fact that the world exists on Torah then can only be an abstraction with no real consequences. Is that what Hazal would have us believe? We have another problem. The Sifrei in Zach HaBracha Devarim 33:2 teaches us, when God reveals himself to give the Torah, he did not appear to Israel solely, but to all the nations. First, he visited the descendants of Esav and invited them to accept the Torah, and they asked, what is written in it? And God answered, you may not murder. Then they countered, our nation's tradition is based on killing. Yitzhak promised Esav that in that way he would succeed. You shall live by the sword, as brought down in Toldos, Bereshis 27:40. We cannot accept a prohibition on murder. So God went on to the nations of Ammon and Moab and offered them the Torah. And they asked him, what does it say? And God said, you may not commit adultery, as brought down in Yisro Shemos 20:14. And they argued, the whole basis of our existence is illicit sexual conduct, as is written, Lot's two daughters conceived from their father in Vayera, Bereshis 19:36. We cannot forswear sexual crimes. God sought out the descendants of Ishmael and offered them the Torah, and they too asked, what does it say? And God told them, you may not steal. In Yisrael Shemos 2015, they objected. Our founding father was himself a bandit. As the angel predicted to his mother, he will be a wild man. His hand will be into everyone's belongings. And this is in Lech Lecha, Bereshit 16:12. We cannot renounce banditry. In this fashion, God canvassed all the nations and offered the Torah, and they all refused. Now, how could the Torah have been offered to the Goyim? Was not Israel destined to receive the Torah from creation of the world? Does not Rashi write in Bereshit 1:1 that the first pasuk, Bereshit, implies that the world was created for the sake of Torah, and that for the sake of Israel? Evidently, the Torah and Israel were destined for each other. Wasn't Israel in any case designated for the honor since the time of the Avot? Were they not taken out of Mitzrayim for just this purpose? Didn't God say to Moshe at Horeb in Shemos 3:12, when you take the people from Mitzrayim, you will worship God on this mountain? And the pasuk, incidentally, which refers to Matan Torah, raises another question. Why didn't God say explicitly that Israel would receive the Torah, rather than the vague statement, you will worship God? Also, why did God never explicitly tell the Avot that their descendants would receive the Torah, rather than merely the land of Canaan and some other blessings, all inferior to the greatest one of Torah? So we'll return to these issues in a second, but it says in Daniel informs us in 7:10, a river of fire starts to flow before God's throne. And the Gemara Hagiga 13b, 14a asks the question, to where does this river flow? It pours onto the heads of the wicked in Gehinnom. Who are they? They are the 974 generations that were plucked before the creation of the world and not created. And Rashi explains that God originally planned to give the Torah after 1,000 generations from creation. He did not do this, however. Rather, he skipped 974 generations and didn't create them and gave the Torah in the time of Moshe, 26 generations after creation. He consigned the first 974 generations to Gehinnom. And Tosafos refused to accept this theory that God sent the people to Gehinnom. Does God inflict punishment without guilt? They objected. While the problem Tosafos raises is baffling, the Gemara does imply, as Rashi claims, that these generations were indeed placed in Gehinnom. And the Gemara begins the discussion with the river of fire and asks to where it flows, and it answers, onto the heads of the wicked in Gehinnom, and then discusses these generations, implying that they are in Gehinnom as well. There are other puzzles here too. Why is it necessary to discover what became of these 974 generations? Since God didn't create them, they never existed. Moreover, if God planned to create them, what stopped him? Nothing can stop God from doing his will. Did he change his mind, deciding he had originally erred? Of course not. God does not err, nor does he change his mind, as Bilam and Balak Bamidbar 23:19 affirms. God is not a man who falsifies, nor human, and changes his mind. Does he say and not do, or speak and not fulfill? And the Navi in Shmuel 1:15-29 declares, God who gives victory to Israel does not lie, nor change his mind, for he is not a man to vacillate. The answer to our problem lies in the Midrash in Bereshit Rabbah 3:7. Rabbi Yehuda Bar Simon notes that the Torah in Bereshit 1:5 says, on the first day of creation it became evening and it became morning one day. The pasuk does not say God announced, there shall be evening and there shall be morning. These will constitute one day. It simply says it became evening. That shows that the progression of time pre-existed the creation. How so? Rabbi Abahu explains that this world was not the first world to be created. Rather, God created many worlds, one after the other, and destroyed each successively. He said, I don't like this one, don't like that one, until the world was created, when he said, this one pleases me. And that is indicated in the pasuk, also in Bereshit 1:5. Behold, it is very good, indicating that the world is good and the previous worlds were not. This midrash is a yet greater enigma. When a human creator conceives a new invention, he plans it thoroughly on paper and he goes over his plans again and again, testing for errors. After he's satisfied that his plans are perfect, he puts it into operation and, of course, it doesn't work. He takes it apart and tests it over again. He goes over his plans, checking for faulty assumptions. Finally, he discovers the bug. And at last the things worked after a fashion. It likely will be years before it is perfected. But God, can Hazal believe of the all-knowing Creator that he makes mistakes? That he is unaware of some of the laws of nature or some of the implications of science? Can we even utter the very thought? No. God knows all the laws of science, for they too are his creatures. He makes no mistakes the first time. The whole universe, with all its complexities, containing the knowledge of the sciences discovered and yet to be discovered and perhaps never to be discovered, were all mapped out in his mind without flaw. So what then is the problem? There was no problem at all. God created the world for the sake of Torah. Torah requires that there be bechira, free will. For otherwise, the mitzvot are themselves senseless. As the Rambam writes in Hilchot Shuvah 5, every person has the ability to lead a good life and be a tzaddik, or to lead an evil life and be a rasha. This is the fundamental concept underlying the whole Torah and its mitzvot. Moshe declared in Netzavim Devarim 30:15, "Look, I have put before you today a choice of good life or death and evil." And he said as well in Re'ah Devarim 11:26-28, "See, I put before you today blessings and curses. Blessings if you obey, and curses if you do not obey God's mitzvot." In other words, you have the ability to choose between all types of human action, whether good or bad. If this were not so, what place would there be for Torah? With what justice could God punish the Rasha or reward the Tzaddik if each does not have perfectly free will to choose his own path? Yisrael too had Bechira to accept the Torah, rejected. Yisrael was given a choice and freely exercised it. So I just want to back up for a second, because this really starts to get into what I opened up with, and that is this whole, carbon dating of the world. And again, a lot of people, I think, when they're so stringent, and again, I'm going to, reference, my previous days in Christianity, there was this hard line reference to, the world begins at Adam and Eve. And that's simply not the case. But when you don't have the backstory of what's going on, it's funny. I'm going to bring up another series that we're currently doing, and that's A Woman's Worth. And what I keep hammering in those series is when you see these play on words, and those play on words, that's the key right there, that something has to be investigated there, that there's something else being said. And again, when you just take it, like we say in the legal community, prima facie, at face value, you kind of miss a lot of what's going on. And again, people just get so stuck in this belief of just, what is written. And, this was part of the introduction, that, we don't have to take this position that we know everything, because the truth is we don't know everything. As it just said, there are things that Hashem, thought of that we do know, we don't know, we may never know. And, that's very clear. Hashem is so complex, it'd be very difficult to give this assertion that we can know all things about Hashem, and that, the sages have told us over and over that's not going to be the case. So I am a little, perplexed when people are just taking this hard line as if they know, the end all be all. So really, it's very interesting. We're going to go on just a little bit longer. And of course, just to let you know, this chapter, all the chapters are a little lengthy. So we're going to try to push through maybe about another, few pages. And then we're going to cut it there and pick up, where we left off again. So Yisrael exercised their bechira in accepting the Torah at Har Sinai. And the people together responded and said, "All that God has said we will do." And Moshe brought back the words of his people to God in Yisro Shemos 19:8. Moshe came and related to the people all the words of God and all the rules, and all the people responded in one voice and said, "All the words that God spoke we will do." This is brought down in Mishpotim, Shemos 24:3. And Moshe took the book of the covenant and read it to the people, and they said, "All that God spoke we will do, and we will obey." And of course, this is the classic characteristics of all Jews, that deep inside, that we will do what you tell us, and then we'll understand it later. And this was probably one of the greatest demonstrations of emunah and bitachon in Hashem, in that, I'm just trusting you explicitly. Like, I'm not going to question what you say, I'll do it. And, And I think what's even greater is if I never understand, right? Like, because we have a few mitzvot that are like this, like, the chukah. It's like we have a whole study on it, of just these things that we don't, we have mitzvot, we don't understand why we do them, but we do them. And so this is really the classic characteristics of Jews, that they just they trust Hashem. And of course, that statement, it's a challenging statement to say we're just going to trust Hashem, but this is a learned thing, and we can get there little by little. So it says, since the Torah was given with free choice, God could not have previously told Moshe that Israel will accept the Torah. Rather, he could only dictate, you shall worship on this mountain. The Avot too could not have been told for the same reason. No nation came into existence with the same name of Israel. When Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov merited by their faith and by their deeds that the nation would be brought to Har Sinai, would be their descendants, the name was bestowed on Yaakov. And this is brought down in Vayishlach, Bereshis 35, 9, 10. And of course, we're just passing through these parshas now that are talking about this. And of course, this happens after the rape of Dinah. And this is, that's a very deep, I encourage you to look into this parsha very deep. And it says, God appeared again to Yaakov when he came from Padam Aram and blessed him. And God said, your name has been Yaakov. Your name will no longer be Yaakov, but Yisrael will be your name. And he called his name Yisrael. And his descendants, however, were not given the title until they accepted the Torah, as Chazal inform us in Hulin 101b. The nation was not dubbed Yisrael until Sinai. The world was created for Israel. Yisrael is whatever nation would receive the Torah. So this also brings me back to a statement in Parkei Avos, right? And it says, like, all of Israel has a portion of the world to come. So you just got the definition. Don't just assume because you're a Yidden that you have a portion of the world to come. That's the definition right there. So for this reason, Rashi writes that the word Bereshis implies that the world was created for both Torah and for Yisrael. There is no contradiction, for Yisrael is the nation that will accept and study the Torah. So, I mean, again, we're seeing a lot of things that are going on in this world. This could be a great remedy for a lot of those things. When God first created the world, they gave the people a choice. He appeared to the people and said, I have the Torah to give. Will you accept it? They said, what does it contain? And he told them. They said, it's not for us. We hear that a lot today, right? It's not for us. You worship Hashem the way you worship Hashem. I'll do it for me. I work with somebody, and he literally told me, he said I was a fanatic because I kept Shabbos. And I was like kind of dumbfounded, because I'm like, wait. That's like a given, right? Like it's one thing to say, I'm not, observing Shabbat, but just to call someone a fanatic, like, that's a given. That was like part of the contract, right? It's like so we hear this a lot. So it says, since the people refused the Torah, the world couldn't survive, and it was destroyed, and God's plans had not failed. Bechira is an essential part of the world's programming, no less than the law of gravity. So you see, like, there are really things about this world that it's a prerequisite for it to exist. Bechira is one of them, and it's no different than the air, than the gravity, than all the other, laws of nature. This is also one of them. So God created another world and proceeded to offer to the Torah. The results were the same, and destroyed it and created another and another 974 times until in the present world our ancestors accepted the Torah. That is the meaning of the statement that God planned to give the Torah after 1,000 generations. He did. But because of their wickedness, 974 generations were discontinued. If we have any doubt of this meaning of generations that were plucked before the creation of the world and not created, a quotation from Bereshis Rabbah 28:4, where the message of the Gemara is presented with slightly different phraseology, will suffice to confirm our understanding. And it states, 1,000 generations were planned, of which 974 were destroyed. If we question whether the intent of Chazal, that the previous worlds were destroyed, was because of their own guilt, that too will be dispelled in Midrash Tehillim 34:1. And it says, God created this world at the appropriate time. For previously God had built world after world and destroyed them because they did not deserve creation. And the Zohar in Bereshit 25a is yet more specific. God created successive worlds and destroyed them, those that would not keep the mitzvot of the Torah. So we're gonna stop right here, and this is actually, we're right about the same place where I am with the live class as well. But I just want to state, there's a lot of things to unpack just in these few pages, and some of it is that when you're talking about, who is Dav Yisrael, why does the world exist, and you kind of take that into the context of what's going on in today's world. Hashem Yirchem, right? Hashem have mercy on us. I encourage you, again, I'm going to say it one more time, I encourage you that if you're looking for a good place to do tzedakah, give it to people who teach Torah, who study Torah. If you don't have the time to do it, fund it at least. This is so important. And I got to tell you that, Torah scholars and those who study the Torah, really, they don't get enough acknowledgement, because we wouldn't be here, literally. I mean, Hashem is telling us, if you don't accept the Torah, you don't study it, the world ceases to exist. Very important concepts, very deep, but I promise you this book will get deeper and it gets even more interesting. But it's really good to unpack this beginning in the beginning, and what does all that mean, because so many times we have seen debates and fights between the religious and the scientific communities as to what in the beginning is, how old is the world, so I think that when we're having these discussions, it behooves us to go to the architect of the whole creation, and that is Hashem. And whether we will understand it all, that's up to Hashem, but our duty is to investigate all that Hashem has to teach us and all that He has laid out in this world. So I want to thank you all for joining today, and I hope we'll all be together again soon. Bezrat Hashem. You can follow this series, Mysteries of the Creation with Devorah Esther, on YouTube at Gimel Dalet 777. Click subscribe to be notified of upcoming shir. If you've enjoyed this video or know someone who would, please share it. Sikul mitzvot.